I want you to just hold your arm straight out in front of you for a second. Just imagine you're holding a regular glass of water, like just a few ounces.
Right. Not heavy at all.
Exactly, not heavy. If you hold it there for, 10 seconds, you barely even register the physical sensation. Your brain just doesn't bother to allocate any real resources to it. But keep your arm locked in that exact position for an hour.
Oh, yeah. That's going to burn.
Right. The lactic acid starts pooling in your deltoids.
Yeah.
Your nervous system is like firing these massive distress signals. And if you keep it there for an entire day.
I mean, your arm is essentially paralyzed at that point.
Exactly. The muscle fibers literally start to tear. But here's the thing. The actual physical mass of the water never changed. It didn't gain a single ounce.
The duration.
Yes.
Yeah.
The unbroken, just relentless tension of holding it without putting it down. That's what transforms a totally negligible weight into like an agonizing trauma.
And that is, it's just a perfect physical illustration of a really deep psychological reality. Because the damage doesn't actually come from the load itself. The damage is a direct result of the lack of recovery. I mean, biologically speaking, we are designed to lift heavy things, endure stress, and then, and this is key, put the weight down to recover.
For rest.
Right. When we fail to put the psychological weight down, our emotional musculature just simply gives out.
Which is really the core of what we're doing in this deep dive for you today. We're drawing from this truly profound discussion out of the Petroli podcast. Featuring Dr. Khalid Al-Munif.
Such a great source.
It really is. He's an expert who just totally dissects the architecture of human resilience, psychological strength, and self-worth. We're going to look at why raw intelligence, or even having just a massive amount of natural talent, is functionally useless if you don't have the underlying mental resilience to actually support it.
Because without that resilience, the talent just collapses under the weight.
Exactly. So we are going to map out the internal saboteurs that drain our cognitive energy and talk about how to construct a life anchored in actual durable balance.
And the foundational premise we really need to establish right here at the start is that true psychological strength is not the avoidance of life's storms.
Right. It's not hiding.
No, it's not about building a bunker and hiding from adversity. It is the learned, deliberate ability to navigate those storms. It's about developing this internal architecture to process challenges, not as, arbitrary punishments, but as the friction required to grow wiser.
Which makes sense, but to do that, you have to fundamentally change how you interpret the weight of that glass of water.
Exactly.
And to change that interpretation, the source material suggests we need a complete demolition of our current cultural blueprints regarding what we call strength. Because, honestly, society sells us a wildly inaccurate, almost like cartoonish version of mental toughness.
Oh, absolutely. The whole emotionless rock thing.
Yes, we are handed this myth of the emotionless rock. It's this idea that a truly resilient person operates like a machine.
Yeah.
Don't cry, they don't get sick, they never admit defeat, and they certainly don't feel pain.
And that stoic cyborg trope is, it's not just inaccurate, it's psychologically lethal.
Lethal? How so?
Well, when you actually study human resilience, true strength requires a really deep integration with human vulnerability. The source material references a profound historical and spiritual archetype to illustrate this, the story of the prophet Ayub.
Also known as Job in Western traditions, right?
Right, exactly. So here is an individual who faced a catastrophic, just cascading failure of his entire life. He lost his immense wealth, he lost his children in a horrific tragedy, and he lost his physical health to this debilitating, painful illness.
Just unimaginable loss.
And the culturally ingrained emotionless rock myth would demand that he just sit there in silence, right? Suppressing the agony, pretending it doesn't hurt.
Which would naturally lead to a massive internal psychological collapse. Repressed trauma doesn't just vanish. It always finds a different, usually way more destructive exit route.
Precisely. But what Ayub did was entirely different. He actually acknowledged his suffering.
Yeah.
He felt the full depth of the grief and the physical agony, and he expressed that pain to his creator.
He did not hide it.
He didn't hide it at all. But, and this is the really critical distinction here, he did it with profound politeness and grace. He articulated his reality without, throwing a tantrum, without losing his core values, and without descending into total nihilism.
Wow.
He didn't pretend he wasn't bleeding. He simply refused to let the wound dictate his character.
Okay, let me challenge that slightly, though. Because, look at the modern corporate landscape, and certainly the digital landscape. It preaches the exact opposite.
Never let them see you sweat.
Exactly. We are literally told Never let them see you sweat. If you're in a leadership position or you're just trying to build a career, acknowledging that you're overwhelmed or in pain is often perceived as this massive liability.
People see it as weakness.
Right. It signals vulnerability to competitors.
Mhm.
Doesn't admitting you're struggling inherently invite predators?
Well, it only invites predators if the admission of pain is coupled with a surrender of agency.
Oh. Okay, break that down.
This is where we have to separate the feeling of pain from the identity of a victim. So, acknowledging a wound is just a diagnostic reality. Saying, my arm is broken or I am severely burned out is just a statement of fact.
That's just data.
Exactly, it's data.
Yeah, totally.
Dwelling on it and making it your entire identity, like saying, I am a broken person and therefore the world owes me, that is where the weakness actually lies.
That makes a lot of sense.
The source text actually uses this highly evocative phrase to describe this. It says, real strength is the capacity to endure the stings of the bees to get the honey.
The stings of the bees to get the honey. I like that.
Right. You want the honey. The bees are going to sting you. A strong person doesn't pretend the sting didn't happen or that their skin isn't swelling up. They acknowledge the sting, they apply an ointment, and they just keep harvesting the honey.
That distinction between like a diagnostic acknowledgement and adopting a victimhood identity is crucial. It's really the recovery rate that matters, not this fake illusion of invulnerability.
Spot on.
And I feel like this ties directly into another cultural pathogen that the source material attacks, which is the disease of perfectionism. Because perfectionism is really just the emotionless rock myth applied to our daily output.
Oh, perfectionism is brutal.
It is. Dr. Khalid El-Munif shares this amazing story in the interview about publishing a book. Now, we all know the traditional publishing process, right? Goes through rounds of developmental edits, line edits, copy edits, proofreads.
Dozens of pairs of eyes.
Dozens. The author obsesses over every single comma. The book goes to print, the physical copies arrive in boxes, and there is a typo.
Oh, no.
And not just buried in the index somewhere. There's a glaring typo on the actual cover of the book.
I mean, for someone wired for perfectionism, that is a literal apocalyptic event.
Total meltdown.
Yeah, it triggers a massive fight or flight response because perfectionism is fundamentally a threat avoidance mechanism.
Right. And the analysis of the aftermath is just fascinating because the typo existed. The book was published. And guess what? The world kept spinning.
The sun rose the next day.
Exactly. The source describes perfectionism as a literal psychological disease because it creates a standard that reality simply cannot support. Like, we expect our careers to be this unbroken, upward, linear trajectory of success.
Which never happened.
Never. And we expect our spouses to be, our therapist, our financial advisor, our romantic ideal, and a perfectly rational roommate all at the same time.
It's an impossible burden.
It is.
Yeah.
And when the typo happens, because let's be real, it always happens, the perfectionist's reality just shatters.
It shatters because perfectionism is built on this cognitive distortion known as the center of the universe fallacy.
The center of the universe fallacy.
Yeah, and this is deeply tied to what psychologists call the spotlight effect. We basically walk around with this ingrained delusion that everyone in our periphery is holding a clipboard, actively monitoring our performance, and just waiting to tally up our mistakes.
Like you're always on stage.
Exactly. So when the authors saw the typo on the cover, the immediate internal panic was, everyone is going to see this. My reputation is entirely ruined. I am a total laughingstock.
When in reality, the person walking through the bookstore is probably just worrying about whether they left their oven on or stressing over an annoying email from their boss.
That is the ultimate liberating truth the source is trying to convey to you. You are normal. Everyone else is normal. The spotlight is absolutely not on you.
We're all just in our own little world.
We are. We're all walking around totally consumed by our own internal monologues and our own crushing anxieties. When you drop the delusion that you are the focal point of everyone else's judgment, you can finally accept your own humanity.
It's such a relief to realize that.
It really is. Your mistakes, your typos, your awkward interactions, they barely even register on other people's radar. Letting go of perfectionism is really just aligning yourself with the mathematical reality that you just aren't that important to strangers.
Okay, so if true strength isn't stoic invulnerability, and it certainly isn't flawless perfectionism, we have to look at what actually forms the bedrock of mental resilience. And the source material points to a single, non-negotiable foundation, which is intrinsic self-worth.
Intrinsic self-worth, it all starts there.
Right, because if the way you value yourself is outsourced to external factors, your entire psychological defense system is fundamentally fragile. And we see this constantly today, right, in this desperate race to source identity from material possessions.
It is an absolute epidemic of externalization. People are attempting to patch these vast, agonizing psychological voids with luxury watches or limited edition sneakers or European car badges.
Just buying status.
Exactly. And the source material ruthlessly dissects this behavior. When you see an individual who is pathologically obsessed with showcasing these external metrics of wealth or status, you are usually looking at someone suffering from a severe internal famine.
An internal famine, wow.
Yeah, they have not built any durable character traits, so they literally have to rent their identity from a luxury conglomerate.
It's an incredibly fragile way to live. Because if the market dictates your value, you're always at risk. The source actually provides a brilliant historical foil to this modern behavior by looking at the prophet Yusuf, or Joseph in the biblical tradition.
A perfect example.
Right. He is standing before the king of Egypt, negotiating for a position of supreme authority over the nation's storehouses during this looming famine. Now, he possesses the ultimate elite lineage. He is a prophet, his father was a prophet, his grandfather was a prophet. He has the ultimate ancestral brand, if you will.
The best resume possible in that era.
Exactly. Yet, when asked why he should be given this immense power, he doesn't leverage that lineage. He doesn't pull rank based on who his father was or his divine connection.
He goes a completely different route.
He does. He states two highly specific, pragmatic internal traits. He says, I am a reliable keeper and I am knowledgeable. He anchors his entire pitch on competence and character.
Internal traits.
Yes. His self-worth was intrinsically tied to his ability to execute the job and his moral reliability.
Which means his identity is bulletproof. If the king fires him the next day, he doesn't lose his knowledge or his reliability. He is still Yusuf.
Exactly.
But contrast that with the person whose identity is the car. If the market crashes and the bank repossesses the car, suddenly they don't just lose a vehicle, they literally lose who they are. They basically cease to exist in their own mind.
That is the terror of outsourced self-worth. But there's a counter-phenomenon the source addresses that is equally dangerous. What happens when an individual actually does possess the competence, the knowledge, and the reliability, but they still feel a crushing sense of worthlessness?
Ah, you're talking about imposter syndrome.
Yes, imposter syndrome. This is where the internal architecture is completely misaligned with the external reality. I mean, you can have a wall full of advanced degrees, the total respect of your peers, a highly successful track record, and still wake up every single morning convinced that today is the day everyone figures out you're a total fraud.
Imposter syndrome just proves that our most violent, high-stakes conflicts are almost never fought in the physical world. They are fought entirely in the unseen landscape of our own minds.
It's an invisible war.
It is. And this disconnect between external validation and internal despair is what the source material categorizes as smiling depression. And the archetype they use to illustrate this is profoundly tragic, but it's really necessary to study. They talk about Robin Williams.
Yeah, that one hits hard.
Yeah.
A man who possessed a generational, seemingly boundless capacity to generate joy, laughter, and empathy from millions of people.
Truly a genius.
By every external metric society values. Fame, wealth, universal adoration, objective genius. He was at the absolute apex.
But the external projection was acting as a shield for a lethal internal battle. He was systematically producing all this light for the world while being entirely consumed by his own darkness.
It's heartbreaking.
The tragic end of Robin Williams is the ultimate proof that you cannot just polish the external avatar and expect it to heal the internal human. If you do not actively cultivate your internal self-worth and address your own psychological wounds, the disparity between your public face and your private reality will eventually just tear you apart.
Which perfectly transitions into the specific mechanisms we use to maintain that public face. Because we don't just wear one mask, right? We have an entire wardrobe of personas we adopt to interact with the world, specifically designed to hide our lack of core self-worth.
We change them like clothes.
We do. And the source material categorizes 3 deeply destructive masks that almost everyone listening has tried on at some point. Let's break these down, starting with what they call the nice guy mask.
The nice guy.
Now, on the surface, this sounds a bit contradictory. We're conditioned from childhood to be nice. Kindness is a virtue. Why is this categorized as a destructive psychological mask?
Well, we have to draw a really hard line between genuine integrated kindness and the pathology of the nice guy. Genuine kindness operates from a position of surplus and strength.
Like you have enough to give.
Exactly. You help someone because it aligns with your moral compass, but you retain your boundaries.
Yeah.
If someone asks you to do something unethical or something that destroys your own well-being, genuine kindness allows you to say no firmly.
But the nice guy mask operates entirely out of a deficit.
Completely. It is a trauma response,
Yeah.
often rooted in a fear of abandonment or just a total terror of conflict. The person wearing this mask is not actually being kind, they are fawning.
Fawning.
Yeah, it's a survival mechanism. They have zero boundaries. They agree to projects they don't have time for. They tolerate blatant disrespect, and they constantly twist their own opinions to match whoever happens to be in the room.
They just want to be liked.
Desperately. They need that external validation of being liked just to justify their own existence. It isn't altruism, it's a covert contract. They are sacrificing their own dignity in exchange for the hope that people won't abandon them.
It's manipulative in a very quiet way, isn't it?
Yeah.
You weren't giving people your true self. You were just giving them a mirror, hoping they'll reward you for it. And it leads to a terrifying buildup of hidden resentment.
Oh, massive resentment.
So the second mask the text identifies is the manager of the universe.
Yeah, this mask is driven by severe, unmanaged anxiety that basically manifests as control. The manager fundamentally believes that if they don't oversee every single detail of their spouse's life, their children's choices, and their coworkers' projects, the entire system is going to collapse.
And they usually disguise this control as caring or just helping out.
But it's actually an ego trip.
A massive one. Because it implies that everyone else is totally incompetent, and only the manager has the foresight to prevent a disaster.
Right. But from a psychological standpoint, this person is carrying an impossible cognitive load. They are trying to hold not only their own glass of water, but the glasses of everyone in their blast radius.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. The inability to tolerate the idea that someone else might make a mistake, or even just do a task differently, ensures that the manager lives in a state of perpetual hyperarousal and inevitable burnout.
And then we have the third mask, which is closely related but has a slightly different flavor. The source calls it the firefighter. This is the individual who abandons their own priorities, their own health regimen, their own career goals, to just sprint toward everyone else's emergencies.
And the firefighter gets a massive dopamine hit from being the savior. In the moment, it feels incredibly heroic. People praise them for dropping everything to help.
Of course they do.
But when you actually study this behavior over time, you realize it is the ultimate distraction technique.
Because if you are constantly running into burning buildings to save other people, you never have to sit quietly in the silence and look at the ashes of your own life.
That is precisely the mechanism. The firefighter avoids the terrifying work of introspection, of setting their own goals and confronting their own failures by just outsourcing their energy to crises that don't even belong to them.
Wow.
The source material is totally adamant about this. Whether you are the people-pleasing nice guy, the controlling manager, or the distracting firefighter, you are living a purely reactive existence. You are literally allowing the demands and dysfunctions of other people to dictate your psychological state.
You're not in the driver's seat.
No, and you cannot build resilience while wearing a mask because the mask absorbs all the energy.
So if we manage to pry these masks off and actually look at the raw operating system underneath, we have to confront the primary engine that generates all this anxiety and drives us to wear the masks in the first place.
The internal dialogue.
Exactly. We have to examine how our mind actively sabotages us. And the source material targets a very specific universal phenomenon. They call it the 11:30 p.m. inner critic.
Oh, we all know this one.
We all know the exact biological and environmental setup for this, right? You've had a brutally long day. You answered the emails, you fed the kids, you finally brush your teeth, turn off the bedside lamp, and pull up the covers.
You're so tired.
So tired. The house is completely silent. You are right on the edge of drifting off to sleep. And then, out of nowhere, your brain boots up and says, hey, let's carefully review that incredibly awkward joke you made in the elevator 3 years ago and dissect exactly why everyone in that building thinks you are incompetent.
It is a universally shared human torment. And neurologically, what is happening here is actually fascinating.
What was the science behind it?
Well, throughout the day, your prefrontal cortex is fully engaged in executive function. You're navigating traffic, solving complex problems, socializing. You are heavily distracted by external stimuli.
We're busy.
Right. But at 11:30 p.m., the lights go out, the phone is put away, and that external data stream is completely severed. The brain defaults to its baseline network. And for most people, that baseline network is hypervigilant and highly critical.
Why is it so critical?
It's a leftover evolutionary survival trait. It was originally designed to scan for physical threats in the dark.
But in the modern world, the threats aren't predators in the dark anymore. They're social threats, mistakes, embarrassments.
Exactly. And the source material makes a really profound observation about this critic. It rarely speaks in your authentic voice.
Wait, really? Whose voice is it?
If you listen closely, the 11:30 p.m. critic usually adopts the tone of a hypercritical parent or a demanding former boss, or just an amalgamation of societal expectations you've internalized over decades. It is literally a hostile squatter in your mind.
And the text uses a great phrase for this. It doesn't just attack you with one memory. It says the critic invites its aunts and uncles to the party.
Yes, it's a cascading neural loop. It starts with the awkward elevator joke. That triggers a feeling of social inadequacy, which then invites a fear about tomorrow's presentation at work.
And then it spirals.
The fear about the presentation triggers financial anxiety, like, what if I get fired? And then the financial anxiety triggers an existential dread about your entire life trajectory. Within 5 minutes, you have gone from a minor memory to a full-blown physiological panic attack, just staring at the ceiling, heart racing.
So how do we intercept this? Because the source uses a highly visible case study here, which blew my mind. Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks is the perfect foil for this discussion, because here is a man with multiple Oscars, immense wealth, global fame, and a reputation as one of the most universally liked human beings on the planet.
Everyone loves Tom Hanks.
By every external metric, he should go to sleep peacefully every single night. Yet the source notes that Hanks realized he was experiencing deep unhappiness and anxiety because he was falling victim to this exact pre-sleep rumination.
Wow, even him.
He would lie awake, dissecting past performances, agonizing over minor mistakes on set, and just letting the internal critic brutalize him.
If Forrest Gump is dealing with this, none of us are safe. So what is the actual mechanical solution? How do we stop it?
The solution requires the development of metacognition.
Metacognition.
Yeah, which is the ability to think about your own thinking. You cannot remain a passive observer, just letting whatever random thought drifts into your head take root. The expert advises active mental monitoring.
So you have to catch it happening.
Yes. When the 11:30 p.m. critic arrives, you have to treat it like an unauthorized intruder. You consciously recognize it and say to yourself, this is not reality. This is my fatigue and my threat response system generating noise.
You label it.
You label it and then you actively banish it. You must redirect the mind's focus to breathing, to a physical sensation, or to a specific constructive thought. You basically have to be the bouncer at the door of your own mind.
You can't just politely ask it to leave. You have to enforce the boundary. And this ties into another cognitive glitch the source breaks down, the if-only trap, counterfactual thinking. We have this strange obsession with looking backward and running these alternate simulations of our lives. If only I hadn't sent that aggressive email. If only I had married my college sweetheart. If only I had invested in that stock.
The source utilizes a wonderfully visceral agricultural analogy for this. They say it is like a cow chewing its cud.
Chewing its cud.
Yeah. A cow consumes grass, swallows it, regurgitates it, and then chews it again to break it down further. When we engage in if-only rumination, we are doing the exact same thing with our past problems. We are emotionally digesting our pain, throwing it back up into our consciousness, and just chewing on it again.
Which provides absolutely zero nutritional value to our current lives. It's a glitch in our brain's predictive processing. We think that by analyzing the past, we can somehow control the future, but we're just running a simulation that is mathematically impossible to resolve. The past is solidified concrete.
And chewing on concrete only destroys your teeth.
Well, that's good.
It is an unnatural, profoundly unhealthy obsession that completely drains the energy required to navigate the present. Psychological strength demands a radical acceptance of reality.
Radical acceptance.
Yes, you made the choices you made based on the emotional maturity, the data, and the circumstances you possessed at that specific moment in time. You cannot judge your 25-year-old self using the wisdom you acquired at 40.
That's so unfair to yourself.
It is. Your past choices forged the coordinates of your current location. You have to make peace with the map you are holding right now and direct all your cognitive horsepower toward the next best move.
All right, let's assume we successfully implement these internal defenses. We develop metacognition. We silence the late-night inner critic. We stop chewing the cud of counterfactual thinking. We step out of our front door feeling centered and psychologically robust.
Ready to take on the world.
Exactly. And immediately, we collide with other human beings.
The hardest part.
Truly, how does the social environment, the people in our orbit, systematically dismantle the resilience we've just built. Let's analyze the phenomenon of energy vampires. We all have this archetype in our lives. It's the coworker, the sibling, the old friend who has been complaining about the exact same marital problem or the exact same unfulfilling job for the better part of a decade.
The chronic complainer is a fascinating psychological study because when we encounter them, our natural empathetic assumption is that they are sharing this problem because they are seeking a solution.
Right, we want to help.
We assume they want to bridge the gap between their current suffering and a better state. But the source material radically reframes this. They do not want a solution. They belong to a category the expert labels professional victims.
Professional victims. So what is the actual mechanism driving them? If they don't want a solution, why are they talking to me?
They are using the complaint as a currency to purchase your emotional validation. It is a parasocial dynamic. By presenting themselves as a helpless victim of circumstance, they farm your pity, your attention, and your time.
It's like emotional farming.
It is, and it provides them with a massive temporary dopamine hit. But more importantly, the act of endlessly complaining is a sophisticated defense mechanism designed to dodge personal responsibility.
Because if they fix it, they have to own it.
Exactly. If they actually implement a solution, they would have to face the terrifying prospect of taking ownership of their life, and they would lose their primary tool for gaining attention.
They prefer the familiar misery of the problem over the terrifying uncertainty of the cure. So what is the protocol for you, the listener? How do you manage a professional victim without compromising your own empathy or turning into a complete sociopath?
The protocol is firm, compassionate boundary setting. You do not enable the loop. When they initiate the complaint, you listen briefly, and then you immediately pivot to a concrete, actionable solution.
Like what?
Like saying, that sounds incredibly difficult. Have you considered speaking to HR about a transfer? Or have you looked into couples counseling? You force the conversation out of the emotional swamp and onto solid ground.
And when they instantly shoot that down with, oh, HR won't do anything or counseling is too expensive, and they try to drag you right back into the swamp.
Then you have your diagnostic answer. They are not looking for a rope. They are looking for company in the quicksand.
Company in the quicksand. Wow.
At that point, the source advises you to systematically protect your own energy. You politely disengage. I'm so sorry you're dealing with that, but I have to get back to this project.
Just cut it off.
You limit your exposure to them, and you do it without a shred of guilt. Your psychological strength is a finite resource. You cannot pour your clean water into a bucket that actively refuses to patch its own hole.
And speaking of massive society-wide buckets with holes in them, we have to look at the macro environment. The source goes deep into how the modern digital landscape is fundamentally altering human resilience. They utilize a term that is highly charged, but they use it clinically. The snowflake generation.
Yeah, and it's important to note they aren't using the term as a pejorative insult to dismiss young people. They are diagnosing a state of profound mental fluidity.
Mental fluidity.
The argument is that the architecture of social media, combined with these hyperprotective societal shifts, has created an environment where the tolerance for emotional friction has plummeted to zero. We are seeing a generation where normal, healthy disagreement is pathologized. A minor critique of an idea is immediately labeled as toxic bullying. Discomfort is equated with trauma.
We have literally lost the ability to distinguish between a paper cut and a gunshot wound.
Exactly.
Right.
And when everything is classified as a severe trauma, the psychological immune system never has to do the actual work of processing minor irritants. It becomes incredibly brittle.
It weakens.
And this brittleness is just compounded by the core engine of social media depression, which is the illusion of the highlight reel.
Oh, the highlight reel. This is where the cognitive distortion gets dialed up to maximum volume. You were sitting on your couch on a Tuesday night, wearing sweatpants, eating leftover pasta, feeling a bit lonely, and you open an app.
The worst thing you can do.
And your brain is instantly assaulted by highly curated, meticulously edited imagery of an influencer on a yacht in Dubai, a former classmate buying a massive house, and an entrepreneur bragging about their startup funding.
And your brain, which evolved in small tribes where status comparison was crucial for survival, cannot comprehend that these images are essentially digital fiction.
It thinks it's all real.
It does. You compare your incredibly mundane, behind-the-scenes reality with all of its boring moments, failures, and quiet anxieties to a composite highlight reel of the top 1% of everyone else's best days.
It's an impossible standard.
It manufactures a massive, entirely artificial gap in self-worth. You feel like a catastrophic failure, not because you are actually failing, but because you're comparing yourself to a phantom that doesn't even exist.
And it's not just the highlight reels.
Right. No. Furthermore, the expert warns that this entire ecosystem, the doom scrolling, the constant influx of global disaster news, the celebrity gossip, the manufactured outrage over totally trivial things, it keeps the brain locked in a state of shallow, frantic reactivity. It paralyzes the deep, critical thinking required to build true resilience.
So to navigate this, we obviously need a filter. Because if we aren't supposed to be fragile snowflakes who melt at the first sign of friction, but we also shouldn't be arrogant narcissists who ignore all feedback, how does a psychologically strong person actually process criticism?
This is where the source introduces a brilliant framework from Jack Canfield.
The 1840-60 rule.
The 1840-60 rule. I love this one.
It is a perfect encapsulation of the arc of human ego and psychological maturity. So when you are 18 years old, your prefrontal cortex is still developing, and your identity is entirely tethered to peer perception. You care deeply, almost obsessively, about what everyone thinks of you. Every glance, every whisper is a referendum on your worth. It is an exhausting way to live. I honestly don't think you could pay me enough money to relive the psychological torment of being 18.
I agree completely. Then, around age 40, people generally hit a developmental milestone. You just get exhausted by the performance. You stop caring so much about the crowd. You develop a bit of a defiant edge. This is who I am. These are my flaws. Take it or leave it. You build a boundary.
That sounds much better.
It is. But then, at 60 years old, the ultimate transcendent realization finally hits.
You realize that no one was ever thinking about you in the first place.
Yes. It loops right back to the center of the universe fallacy we talked about. You realize that for your entire life, the people whose opinions you were terrified of were actually just terrified of your opinion of them. Everyone is just trapped in their own subjective reality.
So how do we operationalize that realization today, before we turn 60?
Yeah.
Like, how do we filter the criticism we receive tomorrow at work?
The expert delineates the vital difference between accepting the concept of criticism and actively absorbing everyone's criticism.
There's a big difference there.
Huge. Being open-minded means you accept that you are fallible and that feedback is necessary for growth. But treating all criticism as equally valid is just intellectual suicide. You have to aggressively consider the source.
Consider the source.
The text asks a simple, brutal question. Why on earth would you take writing advice from someone who has never successfully held a pen? Why are you agonizing over relationship advice from a relative whose own marriage is a toxic disaster?
We tend to weigh all words equally, regardless of who is speaking them. We just hear the criticism and absorb it.
A psychologically strong person evaluates the credibility, the track record, and the intent of the critic. If a respected mentor gives you harsh feedback, you extract the raw data, apply it to your processes, and improve.
You use it.
Right. But if an anonymous troll on social media or an incompetent coworker throws an insult, you recognize it as a reflection of their own internal misery, and you discard it entirely without attaching a single emotion to it. You control the filter.
You control the filter. That is a phenomenal transition point, because everything we have unpacked so far, silencing the inner critic, stopping the rumination, blocking energy vampires, filtering the highlight reels and the toxic criticism, these are all defensive maneuvers.
Right, they're shields.
We are building the walls of the fortress. But Section 5 of the outline pushes us into the offensive strategy. How do we take massive, unavoidable structural hardships and actively utilize them to forge unbreakable strength? And to answer that, the source introduces a paradox that completely upends our standard life goals. They call it the treason of prosperity.
The treason of prosperity. It is a deeply uncomfortable concept for modern people to digest.
Very uncomfortable.
Our entire society is built on the pursuit of ultimate convenience, comfort, and prosperity. We operate under the assumption that if we can just eliminate all friction, make enough money, and achieve perfect comfort, we will finally achieve mental health and happiness.
We all just want to be comfortable.
But the source material looks at history, biology, and psychology and firmly rejects this. Excessive, untested prosperity is a traitor. It softens the individual and it weakens the collective.
Because without resistance, there is no adaptation. The historical case study they used to prove this is just breathtaking. They examine the trajectory of post-World War II Germany.
Yes. If you look at Germany in 1945, it is the definition of absolute catastrophic ruin. The physical infrastructure of the nation is pulverized into dust. The economy is non-existent, the currency is effectively void, they are stripped of military sovereignty, and the national psyche is carrying the darkest stain in human history.
Total devastation.
It took them 12 years of agonizing labor just to reach a baseline where they could hold a standard industrial exhibition. They were forced into the ultimate crucible of survival.
And what was the result of that crucible?
The result was the forging of one of the most dominant, resilient, and innovative economic and industrial powerhouses on the planet. The sheer magnitude of the hardship demanded an unparalleled work ethic, relentless innovation, and a cultural resilience that comfort could never have produced.
It's incredible.
Conversely, the source points out that nations or individuals who inherit massive wealth or endless natural resources without having to struggle for them frequently stagnate. They fall into complacency. They lose their edge because they lack the biological and psychological friction required to stimulate growth.
It's the biological principle of hormesis, right?
Right.
The idea that a small dose of a stressor actually makes the organism stronger. Like if you lay in a zero-gravity environment for a year, your bones literally dissolve because they aren't fighting gravity. You need the weight.
You have to carry the weight to keep your bones strong.
But how does this abstract historical concept apply to the daily life of you, the listener, especially in the context of raising the next generation? Because the deepest biological instinct of any parent is to act as a snowplow, right? Removing every single obstacle, failure, and pain from their child's path.
And acting on that instinct is the most dangerous thing a parent can do. The source uses a brilliant analogy regarding the human immune system, specifically looking at the explosion of childhood allergies.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Studies show that children raised in hyper-sanitized, ultra-sterile, heavily urban environments frequently develop severe immune responses, like peanut allergies or asthma to harmless substances. Why? Because the immune system is a learning machine. It requires early exposure to pathogens, dirt, and allergens to map out what is dangerous and what is safe.
Meanwhile, children raised on farms, rolling in the dirt, exposed to animals, rarely develop these hypersensitivities because their immune system got a rigorous education.
Exactly. And the source applies this biological reality directly to psychology. There is a psychological immune system. If you overprotect children, if you storm into the school to fight every minor battle with their teachers, if you intervene to solve every playground argument, if you ensure they always win and never feel the crushing sting of a failed test or a lost game, you are depriving their psychological immune system of its necessary education.
You're creating a child who will have an anaphylactic psychological shock the first time a boss criticizes them at age 24.
You are literally guaranteeing their fragility in adulthood. They need to walk barefoot, metaphorically speaking. They need to experience the friction of a difficult coach. They need to navigate the betrayal of a middle school friendship. They need to fail the math test and figure out how to study harder.
They have to learn how to recover.
That is how they build the antibodies of resilience. You don't abandon them to massive trauma, but you must allow them to experience the micro-traumas of normal human existence so they learn how to recover.
So taking this concept of necessary friction and adaptability into our adult lives, how do we practice this in real time? Especially in our closest relationships, which are inherently messy and fraught with friction. The source introduces a classic philosophical framework to navigate this: the hedgehog dilemma.
The hedgehog dilemma. This is a concept originally formulated by the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Imagine a group of hedgehogs caught in a freezing winter storm. To survive the lethal cold, their instinct is to huddle tightly together to share body heat.
Makes sense.
But as they press against one another, their sharp defensive spikes stab into their neighbors, causing intense pain. To escape the pain, they scatter and move apart. But when they move apart, they lose the collective warmth and begin to freeze to death.
It is the single most accurate metaphor for human intimacy and workplace dynamics I have ever heard.
It is brilliant because it captures the inescapable tension of human connection. We desperately need the warmth of community, intimacy, and collaboration to survive. But other humans are equipped with spikes flaws, egos, traumas, irritating habits. If we demand perfect, painless closeness, we get stabbed. If we isolate ourselves to avoid all pain, we freeze in loneliness.
I see this constantly in the modern workplace, especially with remote work. People want the warmth of being a highly valued, indispensable team player. They want the promotions and the inclusion. But if they get too close and dissolve all their boundaries, they get stabbed by 80-hour work weeks, weekend emails, and total burnout.
Exactly.
But if they retreat entirely, refuse to engage, and become a ghost on Zoom, they freeze to death in their career, missing out on mentorship and opportunities.
Finding the optimal distance is the core of adaptability. The hedgehog dilemma teaches us that true psychological strength isn't about finding a relationship or a job with no spikes. That is a fantasy. It is about actively managing the distance.
Managing the distance.
It's accepting that a certain baseline level of friction is the price of admission for the warmth. You focus on the immense value of the body heat you are receiving in your current reality, rather than complaining about the occasional prick of a spike or longing for a utopian, painless past that never actually existed.
We are entering the final phase of this architecture now. We've torn down the myths, we've unmasked the saboteurs, and we've embraced the necessary friction of the crucible. Now we have to talk about implementation. How do we operationalize this philosophy? What are the actual mechanical daily routines that lock this resilience into our nervous system? We talked extensively about the night, how 11:30 p.m. is the ultimate danger zone for rumination. If the night is the hazard, what is the safe harbor?
The source material firmly identifies the morning as the anchor point of resilience. How you launch your consciousness into the day dictates the defensive perimeter of your mind. They introduce the practice of the renewed awakening.
Renewed awakening.
This is radically different from the modern default of waking up, grabbing the phone from the nightstand, and immediately flooding the brain with emails, news, and cortisol before your feet even touch the floor.
Which just instantly enslaves your brain to the demands of the external world.
The renewed awakening is a deliberate, fiercely protected space of conscious framing. It goes beyond simple gratitude. It is the active cultivation of amazement. The text quotes a beautiful directive: "Be amazed, my friend."
Amazement feels like such a strong word for a Tuesday morning before coffee. Why amazement?
Because human neurology is wired for habituation. We suffer from a chronic disease of familiarity. The reticular activating system in our brain filters out anything that is constant so we can focus on new threats. As a result, we take the absolute miracles of our baseline existence completely for granted.
We don't even notice them.
You do not consciously think about the fact that your lungs pull oxygen from the air seamlessly, or that your legs can carry your body weight, or that you slept under a roof without fear of violence, until one of those things is abruptly taken away by a medical diagnosis or a tragedy.
We only appreciate the baseline when it is shattered.
The practice of the renewed awakening is the act of forcing your brain to shatter the habituation itself. You wake up and actively marvel at the fact that you have another 24 hours of consciousness. You marvel at your physical health, however imperfect it may be.
It sets the tone.
Starting your cognitive engine from a baseline of profound awe provides a massive psychological armor. When you start the day amazed that you simply exist, the petty annoyances, the traffic jam, the rude email, the spilled coffee lose their power to derail you. They just bounce off the armor.
It fills the psychological cup before the world has a chance to drain it. Now, another massive drain on our daily energy reserves is the sheer volume of choices we have to make. We live in an era of unprecedented optionality, which breeds a paralyzing anxiety about making the perfect decision. Whether it's selecting a career path, choosing a life partner, or even just agonizing over which software platform to use for a project.
This decision paralysis is just perfectionism wearing a different mask. We are terrified of the counterfactual if-only trap we discussed earlier, so we delay making a choice. The strategy outlined in the source to combat this is brilliantly simple, yet requires immense discipline.
What's the protocol?
The protocol is gather the necessary data, consult the credible experts, establish a timeline, make the decision, and then violently close the door on all other options. You stop asking for opinions.
That is the hardest part. You finally buy the house after months of searching. And the very next week, your uncle comes over for a barbecue, looks around and says, "Oh, the foundation looks a bit weird and the school district is declining. You're probably overpaid." And in 3 seconds, your joy is completely evaporated.
Because you left the door of validation open, the expert emphasizes a crucial shift in mindset. You don't just make the right decision, you make a decision and then you actively make it right.
Oh, that's powerful. You construct the success after the choice.
Exactly. Endlessly crowdsourcing opinions after the ink is dry is a catastrophic energy drain. Once the choice is made, you direct 100% of your cognitive horsepower toward maximizing the positives of that specific reality. You ignore the phantom alternatives, you burn the ships.
But let's look at the absolute extreme end of the spectrum. Sometimes you make the right choice, you do all the work, and the ship still sinks. Sometimes the hardship is simply too immense for standard psychological tools. A catastrophic health crisis. The sudden, profound loss of a loved one. When the Stoic frameworks crack, when the morning routines aren't enough, What holds the human psyche together? The source material takes the conversation to a deeply spiritual, existential level here.
And it is vital to explore because secular mechanical resilience has a ceiling. Without an overarching philosophical or spiritual anchor, the human mind is incredibly vulnerable to existential dread.
It's terrifying to think about.
When you look at the sheer scale of the universe and the terrifying randomness of tragedy, we are fragile, microscopic entities. The source shares an incredible physiological statistic to brutally illustrate our fundamental lack of control. Your heart beats roughly 100,000 times a single day. It pumps 7,500 liters of blood through miles of vascular tissue.
And you have zero conscious input in that process.
Yeah.
You don't have to stay awake to tell the valves to open and close. It operates entirely outside of your executive function.
Right. And recognizing that limitation, understanding that you are not the ultimate manager of the universe, not even the manager of your own cellular biology, is paradoxically freeing.
Freeing.
Surrendering the illusion of ultimate control to a higher power, however the listener defines that spiritually, removes an impossible psychological burden. It cures the existential anxiety of having to hold the entire world together.
That makes a lot of sense.
Furthermore, the spiritual framework discussed in the source, the belief that pain is not random biological torture, that endurance in the face of suffering is noted and rewarded, and that a grand ultimate justice exists beyond the visible horizon of this life, provides a profound peace of mind. Secular resilience can help you bounce back to the earthline, but a spiritual anchor transmutes the suffering. It gives the crucible a purpose.
It changes the pain from a senseless injury into a meaningful passage. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, let's trace the architecture we've built today. We began by completely redefining what a strong person looks like. It is not the emotionless, rock-suppressing trauma. It is the prophet Ayub, enduring the sting of the bees while harvesting the honey.
We dismantled the disease of perfectionism and the spotlight fallacy, realizing that a typo on the cover of our lives doesn't end the world because everyone is too busy worrying about their own typos.
We examine the foundation of intrinsic self-worth, moving away from the fragile, rented identity of material wealth and anchoring ourselves in the undeniable competence of the prophet Yusuf. We committed to ripping off the exhausting masks of the nice guy, the manager of the universe, and the firefighter, reclaiming the energy we were wasting on reactive living.
We learn the tactical defense of metacognition, posting a bouncer at the door of our mind at 11:30 p.m. to silence the inner critic, and refusing to chew the cud of counterfactual past mistakes.
We established ruthless boundaries with the energy vampires, stepping away from the professional victims who want company in their quicksand. We stepped back from the snowflake culture of social media, recognizing the highlight reel for the fiction it is, and we applied the 18-40-60 rule to aggressively filter the criticism we receive.
We embraced the treason of prosperity, understanding through the lens of post-WWII Germany that excessive comfort is the enemy of growth, and that just like the immune system fighting allergens, our children and ourselves require the friction of failure to build psychological antibodies.
We learned to navigate the painful spikes of the hedgehog dilemma to find the optimal distance for human connection. And finally, we locked it all in with the daily armor of the renewed awakening, the discipline to make a decision and make it right, and the spiritual surrender to the vastness of what we cannot control.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most provocative concept from the source material, a guiding philosophy encapsulated in 2 words: die empty. It is the ultimate metric of a life well lived. To die empty means you do not go to your grave hoarding your potential. You do not reach the end of your timeline with your most brilliant ideas, your deepest capacities for love, your boldest risks, and your unspoken truths still locked safely inside you.
Because you were too paralyzed by the 11:30 p.m. inner critic or too terrified of a stranger's comment on a digital highlight reel to actually deploy them.
Precisely. The tragedy is carrying the music all the way to the grave. The call to action is to pour it all out into the world. Use the psychological strength you've built. Empty the vessel of your potential. Expend your energy on the things that actually matter before your time expires.
What an incredibly powerful mandate. So, to you, listening to this right now, look at your own life. What is that one decision you've been endlessly chewing the cud over? What is that one project, that one boundary, or that one truth you are holding back because you are terrified of the weight it might bring? Make the choice today. Shut the door on the phantom alternatives and make the choice right. Stop crowdsourcing your self-worth. Put down that glass of water you've been carrying in a paralyzed grip for the last decade. Shake out your arm and recognize that you are infinitely stronger than you think.
Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others.